Hello guys, welcome back to Fanfic Dojo. Today we will be listening to What If Naruto Traveled to Past and Fell in Love with Mito Part 2. The village was still buzzing from excitement because of the extraordinary abilities the newcomer had shown. It was ingenious to think that one could recreate the effects of Miten using Fuinjutsu, and even more ingenious to succeed in doing so. Never had anyone in the infamous clan of Fuinjutsu had though of using Fuinjutsu such a way, and Naruto's innovation had provided proof to many people in the village that Fuinjutsu was not limited to scrolls and writing. Uzumaki Mito had a smile on her face as she saw the astonished look on her father's face. Mito knew that her father had always wanted to powerful lone shinobi to be born into the Uzumaki clan, so that they would no longer have to depend on the Senju clan if they were targeted by singular powerful shinobis. Mito herself, while a talented kunoichi in her own right, was not as gifted as the powerhouses that were her childhood friends. Senju Tobirama and Senju Hashirama were two of the most powerful people Mito knew. Since they were children, the Senju clan had been in war, and the Uzumakis had often aided them in battle. Mito could still remember the other Senju brothers that have died in the past. She was good friends with them too. Mito noticed that Tobirama became more and more stoic and serious as he aged, and that was perfectly fine given his harsh past experiences with war. Senju Hashirama, on the other hand, hadn't really changed at all. The happy boy Mito once knew was a happy man today. The current leader of the Senju clan had always been like a kind and gentle older brother to Mito, and she will always treasure him as one of her most precious people. Mito's parents had told her about the potential marriage between herself and Hashirama. The young woman had been conflicted about her own feelings at first, but soon she figured out that the love she had for Hashirama was familial love, not romantic love. Mito was a little guilty about declining the marriage offer, since she had noticed that Hashirama had grown to love her romantically, but she wanted to marry a man she truly loved. Mito-chan, said a sudden voice beside the heiress that knocked her out of her stupor. Are you okay? Mito smiled and nodded over at Asuka. I'm fine, just thinking about stuff. Asuka grinned and draped an arm over Mito's shoulders. Is someone still thinking about Naruto? Teased the cowgirl as Mito blushed a little even though she wasn't thinking of Naruto. Admit it, girl, you have a crush on him. Mito's blush flared as she pushed her friend away. Shut up, exclaimed the embarrassed girl. I do not have a crush on him, I only met him a few days ago. Asuka continued to grin slyly. That doesn't matter, Mito-chan, said the other red-haired girl. You know what they say, there is really something as love at first sight. As much as Mito wanted to deny her friend's words, she had to admit that she was attracted to the powerful Uzumaki. In the brief time Mito had met Naruto, he had already saved her twice from pursuing Uchihas. There was something about his presence near her that made Mito feel safe, and his blue eyes just enchanted her. But no matter what, all she felt for Naruto at the moment was attraction. She had no real feelings for him. Yet, Mito shook her head of her confusion and focused her eyes on the road in front of her. No matter what, I am not focusing on my love life right now, announced the heiress as she gave Asuka a look. Now I am trying to help Tu-chan in bring the Uzumaki clan to a higher standing, said Mito while thinking. Without having to marry into the Senju clan. Asuka hummed in thought as she linked her hands behind her back. Well, we do have Naruto now, so that might help us on the power scale. Mito nodded in agreement. She was still certain that Naruto was at least in the same league as Tobirama. Yes, Naruto will definitely be of help. Asuka tilted her head in wonder. Where is Naruto, by the way? I thought he was joining us for lunch. The heiress nodded. He is, but he is going to meet with Tu-chan first. Back in Genryusai's office, Naruto was standing with pride as his leader offered him an official Uzumaki Hitai 8. Naruto gladly placed the headpiece against his forehead, and despite the coldness of the metal against his skin, Naruto felt warmth spread out from within his body. Naruto once again felt the fire within him surge with motivation. He was determined to bring the Uzumaki clan to the pinnacle of the elemental nations. Genryusai smiled at the look in Naruto's eyes and patted his shoulder. I like your determination, Naruto-kun, said the aged leader. Your will and power shall bring the Uzumaki clan to further greatness. Naruto bowed deeply for his leader. I will do my very best, Genryusai-sama. The Uzumaki leader smiled as he walked back behind his desk and sat down. The young man in front of him could very well be the person he would need to bring the Uzumaki clan into the league of the Uchiha and Senju. At the same age as Hashirama, Naruto showed tremendous power and skill. Genryusai wasn't sure if Naruto was as powerful as the Senju brothers, but he knew that it was enough to bring back their former fame. As you know, Naruto-kun, began Genryusai as he gestured Naruto to take a seat. The Uzumaki clan had been falling into the backwater of the shinobi world in recent years, and that is a dire problem for us. Naruto nodded seriously, sensing the atmosphere of the incoming conversation. The Uchiha and Senju clans were blessed with tremendous talent in recent years, and they have surpassed in his power because of that. But now that we have acquired a wayward son like yourself, I hope you join them in the higher ranks. Naruto smiled, happy that his leader thought so much of him. You flatter me, Genryusai-sama. The old man chuckled and shook his head. I believe in giving credit when credit is due. Genryusai poured himself and Naruto some tea. No ordinary shinobi can take down a full Anbu team of mine without so much as breaking a sweat. Naruto smiled at the implications. You are one powerful young man, Naruto-kun, and you may very well be a beacon of hope for our clan. Naruto graciously accepted his cup of tea with a slight bow before responding. The Uzumaki clan is my home and family. I will give it my all to see the day when we are even more powerful than the Senju and Uchiha. Genryusai smiled and sipped on his tea. I am happy to see such fire in you, Naruto-kun. Sensing that his leader was in a good mood, Naruto decided to test the waters a little. Genryusai-sama, started the blonde man as he gained the attention of his leader. Might I offer a personal opinion of mine of the clan as of now? Interested, Genryusai nodded with a smile on his face. Of course. Naruto inwardly sighed before he began. I found that the Senju and Uchiha clans are not only powerful because of their exceptionally strong leaders, but also because of their vast number of clansmen, deduced the blonde man as Genryusai nodded in agreement. While in the long term, our clan can promote the idea of having more children to the couple in the village so we could have that advantage too, but that would be time-consuming and impractical. Genryusai finished his cup of tea and looked at Naruto. And what might you suggest as an alternative? Naruto smiled. Please bear with me Genryusai-sama as this may sound unorthodox, muttered the young man almost sheepishly. But I was thinking that we should acquire ourselves some allies from outside of the clan. The Uzumaki leader was intrigued. You mean from other clans? The blonded nodded with conviction. Hi. Genryusai was silent for a while as Naruto waited patiently. But as you know, traditionally we Uzumakis have rather been isolationists, and he enjoy our own peace and development too much to involve ourselves with another clan. Naruto nodded in understanding, he had expected that. Yes, but certain sacrifices must be made in order to gain power, said the blonde Uzumaki. With the aid of other clans our power will increase exponentially, and our name will naturally be more well known throughout the lands. The leader smirked and crossed his arms. Say that I agree with you. Who would you suggest as an ally for us as of now? The ex-Konoha ninja was sure glad that he studied up on history before traveling back in time. From what I know, the Inuzuka clan is in a rather nasty turn of fate right now. Naruto was referring to the war the Inuzukas shared with the Shiruma clan. Naruto had read the full story of the war inside one of the archives that remained untouched after the raids on Konoha. The Shirumas were hired by the daimyo of Sum no Kuni to eliminate the Inuzuka entirely, and the Inuzukas were in dire need of help from annihilation. The Inuzukas are just a tad weaker than the Shiruma clan, and if we offer to help them now, victory is almost assured. Genryusai seemed to be thinking over the situation. While that may seem ideal in the long term, do you think we have enough resources to start a war like this? Naruto nodded instantly without a shred of doubt, now sure that his leader was just testing him. Definitely. We have our own sources of food and weapons from right here inside the village, and it can produce enough to last a war of at least a year. 20 years of being the supreme commander of the allied forces had done Naruto well as a leader. Based on the strength of the Shiruma clan, we would only need 3 months at most to defeat them. The leader leaned further into the table. Another question. Why are you suggesting we attack the Shiruma clan instead of the Inuzuka? Asked Genryusai soundly. Even if we win against the Shiruma clan, we would have made an enemy of the Sum no Kuni daimyo, but if we aid the Shiruma clan instead we would have gained an ally in them as well as the goodwill of a nation. The blonde Uzumaki shook his head. No, the Shiruma clan have been known as rather snitchy and dark people who would do anything to reach their goal, which does not fit well with our own code. Reasoned Naruto to his leader. And the Shiruma are also relatively close to the Uchiha clan, and being close to them would put us in an awkward place with our close friend, the Senju clan. Genryusai nodded at all of Naruto's points. But the Inuzuka clan on the other hand, is known as one of the most loyal and honorable clan in the elemental nations. Sure, they are not as powerful as many other clans, but personally I value loyalty above everything, and I would very much like to have them as an ally. Genryusai was silent for a few seconds before a smile emerged on his lips. Okay then, let's do it. Naruto was shocked and couldn't find his voice for a second. What? The Uzumaki leader chuckled and rested his arms on his desk. The idea of forming alliances had always been in my mind, but I have never found a capable man to lead the war for me. Revealed Genryusai as Naruto assumed what was coming. You may be a very new member of the clan, Naruto-kun, but you are powerful, and I have faith that you will be able to win us this war, said the leader as Naruto nodded back. But nonetheless you are still new, and many people will not obey your command if you are to lead this war. Genryusai smirked. That is why I will assign Mito as the commander for this mission, and you will be her second in command. Will that be alright with you? While Naruto hadn't expected such a result, he was happy about it. That sounds great, Genryusai-sama. This will also provide Mito-sama with the needed experience as the future leader of our clan. Genryusai nodded with a smile. Okay then, I will inform Mito of this mission as soon as possible, and while I do that, you have 3 days to prepare for this battle. Naruto stood up and bowed. Hi, Genryusai-sama. Just as the meeting was about to adjourn, the double marble doors opened, making the two men look over to the entrance. Naruto was surprised to see the same boy he saw the day before at the gate with Mito. Like most Uzumakis, the boy had red hair that reached the top of his neck, and he had the same gray eyes as Mito. Naruto remembered the boy addressed Mito as his aunt the day before, so it was safe to assume that the boy was a grandchild of Uzumaki Genryusai. Gigi, am I interrupting? Asked the boy rather timidly. Genryusai smiled right at the sight of the little boy and stood up. No, we are finished, said the man without looking at Naruto. Come in, Ren-chan. Ren smiled and ran to his grandfather and jumped into his arms. If you are finished, can you teach me some jutsu, Gigi? Asked the boy with his big round eyes. Mito Obaken isn't teaching me anything. Naruto stood at the edge of the room with a smile on his face. He remembered that he thought Ren resembled Konohamaru a little, and seeing him with his grandfather just made it more clear. Naruto smiled at the thought of Konoha pestering the Sandaime to teach him ninjutsu. The young Sarutobi had become very powerful, and was one of the last of Konoha's forces to perish. The loss of his little brother still haunted Naruto's thoughts, and his only solace was the hope that he would be able to stop Madara once and for all. Ren looked over at Naruto shyly and waved his small hand. Hello, muttered the boy softly. Naruto smiled and walked closer to his leader and the boy. Hello there, Ren-kun, I'm Naruto. Ren smiled and nodded quickly. I know, I remember that you are the one who saved Mito Obeken. Ginryusai smiled at his grandson's innocent behavior. The blonde Uzumaki chuckled and patted the boy on the head. I am. The red-haired boy leaned closer to Naruto while still in his grandfather's arms. Can you teach me a jutsu as well? Ginryusai, as was Naruto, were intrigued by the boy. Why do you want me to teach you? Ren smiled and held his fists together. Because I want to be strong enough to save Mito Obeken when I am older. Naruto was surprised by the boy's words and Ginryusai just smiled proudly. It is okay if I teach him something, Ginryusai-sama. Asked the blonde man, surprising his leader. You really want to teach him something? You are not obligated to, muttered the Uzumaki leader. Naruto smiled at Ren's happy expression as he placed his hands on his hips. The want to protect people precious to oneself is something I respect, and I want to help Ren-kun grow stronger so he could do just that. Ren turned back to his grandfather and clapped his hands together. Please, Gigi. Ginryusai sighed and nodded. Fine, muttered the old man as he settled the boy on the ground. Make sure you pay attention, Ren-chan. Naruto-kun is a powerful young man and you will learn a lot from him. Ren jumped up with a smile. Hi, cried the boy before he grabbed Naruto's hand and tried to pull him out of the room. Let's go, Naruto-nichan. Naruto smiled at the affectionate suffix and sighed. Hold your horses, muttered the man as he followed the boy along. The Uzumaki compound was the whole of one village, and it was not very big. The actual village covered about half of the island space, and the other half were mainly forests and a few training fields. Naruto and Ren were at one of those training fields, and the boy was very excited to learn from the strong man who saved his precious aunt. Ren had also witnessed Naruto fight the Anbu team, but he didn't really see anything as Naruto was moving too fast for a child like Ren to follow. After seeing Naruto's skills, the boy practically looked up to Naruto, and would want nothing more than to become strong like him. Are you ready, Ren-kun? Asked Naruto with his arms crossed. Standing across from the boy, Naruto couldn't help but think back to the time he spent training with Konohamaru. Both the master and the apprentice were rather idiotic back then, and Naruto knew now that teaching Ren his sexy jutsu would be a very bad idea. Inwardly chuckling at the face his sexy jutsu had made out of the Sandaime and Jiraiya, Naruto outwardly had a straight face on him that slightly intimidated the boy in front of him. Ren was standing as straight as a board as he nodded. Hi. Naruto smiled and nodded. Good. Come at me. The wind blew between the two in tension as Ren had a confused expression on his face. What? The blonde man suddenly disappeared from sight and appeared behind Ren in under a second. I said come at me, exclaimed Naruto as he pushed the boy to the ground. Ren groaned as he hit the ground but quickly stood back up. Fine, you asked for it, cried the boy as he charged at Naruto with openings everywhere. The red-haired boy took 3 seconds to reach Naruto, and launch a sloopy punch at Naruto's torso. Naruto just stood still and let the boy hit him. A baby has more power than you, hit harder, ordered the older Uzumaki as he pushed the boy down again. Ren growled in anger and rushed back at Naruto. HHHAAA, cried out the boy as he jumped and kicked Naruto in the chest. It was still miserably weak, but Naruto smiled at the fact that Ren realized that kicking was much more powerful than punching and changed his strategy. It was a good sign for the boy. Still no good, try again. Ren pushed himself up again and relentlessly charged at Naruto with reckless abandon. While Naruto continued to accept the boy's attacks, he was silently monitoring his stamina, chakra control, and chakra reserves. As an Uzumaki, Ren had larger chakra reserve than normal people, and his stamina was that of a proper Uzumaki, but his problem was his chakra control. It was perhaps a very common problem among Uzumakis, because their chakra reserves were larger, they would have more difficulty regarding chakra control. Naruto inwardly grimaced at the thought of the effort he put into complete master his own chakra. It took him almost 2 years to accomplish. Having to adapt to the chakra of the Kyuubi and part of the Jubi was no easy feat, but the rewards were astounding. The blonde man's eyes widened slightly at the reminder. His chakra control should be much better than before. He no longer held the mass volumes of chakra because of the Kyuubi and Jubi, he now only possesses his own natural chakra. A smile found its way to Naruto's face. With his chakra control now, he could most likely be able to recreate Tsunade's superhuman strength. Such power would aid Naruto much in these difficult times. Naruto planned to reunite all the clans in Konoha under Uzumaki's name, and that would require quite a bit of strength. Ha! Cried Ren as he punched Naruto across the face. Naruto was broken out of stupor from the harder than usual punch from the boy, and looked down at him. Okay. That's enough, Ren-kun. Ren was panting a little as he rested his hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. The boy couldn't believe how strong Naruto was. He was punching and kicking as hard as he could for a few minutes straight, and the man took all of the like they were nothing. Ren couldn't even see a mark or a red spot of his face after his hardest punch. Naruto smiled and crossed his arms across his chest. Not bad, Ren-kun. The boy looked up at Naruto confused. And not bad. The blonde man patted the boy's head and nodded with a smile. Yes, I was merely measuring your chakra reserves and stamina, and I have to say that you are pretty good considering how young you are. The boy smiled at his words and nodded. But, your chakra control is rather sloppy and it is holding back your usual skills. Ren looked down a little and nodded timidly. Yeah, Ba-chan had been telling me the same thing, but I am getting tired of the chakra exercises. Naruto chuckled and nodded. I know what you mean, I hate those tedious tasks myself, muttered the man as Ren chuckled back. How about I teach you a little trick so you can speed it up a little? Ren looked amazed and nodded. Sure, is there something like that? The blonde man smiled and nodded. Yes there is, give me your hand. The boy held out his palm in front of Naruto. This is a seal that I made a few years back, muttered Naruto as he slapped a piece of paper on the boy's hand. What does it do? Just as Ren asked that question, he felt a lot of his own chakra being sucked into the seal, and a moment later, a poof of smoke appeared around him. Ren looked on his shock as a clone of himself stood right beside him. He reached out for it and touched its arm. It's a solid clone. Sugoi. Naruto chuckled at the boy's amazement. This seal basically creates a cage bunshin for you without you having to cast the jutsu yourself, explained the man as his hands on his hips. I would teach you the cage bunshin later, but you are not ready for it now, so you will use this seal. Ren looked up at Naruto again with his smile still on his face. But how will this help me with my chakra exercises? Naruto smiled and crossed his arms. The greatest benefit of a cage bunshin is that whatever the clone experiences would be transferred over to the original after it is dispelled, explained the man as the boy started to nod slowly. So, training with one cage bunshin basically is cutting the training in half, as whatever progress he makes, you get them. Ren jumped up in joy and excitement. Wow, this is amazing, cried the boy as Naruto chuckled and absent-mindedly thought that the boy was smarter than he was when he first learned of the secret from Kakashi and Yamato. It took him quite some time and a demonstration to understand. So how many clones can I make with this seal? Only one, replied Naruto smoothly. With your chakra right now, one clone is the best number for you. Any more you wouldn't be able to sustain them long enough to get any actual training done. Ren had a perpetual smile on his face. Okay. One is still much better than nothing. The boy ran and wrapped his arms around Naruto's waist, taking the man in surprise. Thank you, Naruto ni. Naruto had a blank look on his face for a brief second before he ruffled the boy's hair and patted him on the back. You're welcome, little man. Just remember that when you get stronger you have to protect your Mito Obaken as best as you can. Ren looked up at Naruto and nodded. Hi. Wow. You two sure are getting along. said a sudden voice from behind the two boys. Naruto and Ren looked over and saw a smiling Mito looking at them. The young woman had her hands on her hips and seemed to be quite amused at the scene. Suddenly, Naruto remembered that he was supposed to meet Mito and Asuka at Ichiya's ramen right after his meeting. He must have completely missed it. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Sorry Mito, I forgot about lunch. Ren giggled and ran to her aunt. Naruto ni was teaching me. Mito smiled and lifted Ren up into her arms. Really? Is he a better teacher than me? Asked the girl as she kissed Ren on the cheek. Ren looked sheepish and nodded slowly. Well, Naruto ni's teaching is not as boring. Naruto chuckled as Mito just smiled softly. At least you are not a liar, Ren-chan, said the girl with a sigh before she looked over at the blonde Uzumaki. You know, Asuka is a little pissed off at you for not showing up. Naruto smiled and nodded. I'll apologize to her as soon as possible, said the man as he walked up to his leader's daughter. And I'll say it to you now, sorry Mito. Mito waved him off and held Ren higher in her arms. It's alright, at least you were doing something good for Ren-chan. The blonde chuckled and ruffled Ren's hair. Ren-kun is quite the smart boy, he understood what I taught him quite easily. Ren beamed at Naruto's praise. Ren suddenly popped up and jumped out of Mito's arms. I forgot that Ba-chan wanted to see me, cried the boy a little scared. Bye Mito Obakan, Naruto ni, I'll see you later. The boy immediately ran out of the training field and toward his home. His Ba-chan would be angry if he was late, she is very scary when she is angry. Naruto chuckled along with J.H. Mito as they both watched the boy scramble to his grandmother. Ren-kun is a good kid, but he seems scared of Retsu-sama though. Mito giggled and nodded. Oh yeah, she may not look like it, but Ka-chan is more feared among the clan than anybody else. Naruto inwardly mused that Tsunade must have received her intimidating powers from Retsu. So Ren-kun is your nephew, Mito? The heiress nodded with a sigh. Yes, his father, who is my brother, died a few years ago when Ren-chan was only 7 years old, muttered the woman with a soft voice, clearly still sad about her loss of her brother. My other brother died a year after, and Ren-chan had been quite sad ever since. The blonde placed a hand on Mito's shoulder for comfort. The loss of family is never easy. I understand how you feel, said the man as Mito looked back a little at him. I lost both my parents to the Uchiha clan, and my godparents to other enemies. Mito sighed and looked down to the ground. It seems that in these times, everyone will have a sad and unfortunate past. Naruto felt very nostalgic at her words. These days, parents are burying their children, villages are razed to the ground, innocent lives are being sacrificed into a never-ending cycle of hatred and war. Naruto had an involuntarily flashback of Nagato moment before he death. Not for long, muttered Naruto. Mito was confused and tilted her head back. What? Naruto looked into Mito's eyes with conviction. I believe more than anything that true peace is attainable, and one day I will achieve it, announced Naruto with hope surging in his chest. One day, people will be able to understand one another, and people will be able to make compromises. Mito dragged onto Naruto's every word. Clans will be able to work together as one united force, shinobi will no longer be known as makers of chaos and havoc, but protectors of peace. You really think it's all possible? Asked Mito softly. Naruto smiled down at the girl and nodded with no doubt in his eyes. I know it is possible, there is a way and I will find it, said the man proudly. I will break the curse of hatred that condemns us all. There is such a thing as peace, and I will find it. I will not give up. Mito softly laughed and nodded. Sure, I will help you find it, muttered the woman full of emotion. For some reason I really believe you, Naruto. The blonde looked down at her with a little surprise and obvious happiness. I will follow you to find this peace, for us, and for all Uzumakis in our clan. Naruto nodded with a smile. You got something wrong, Mito. I am supposed to be the one to follow you. Mito chuckled and sighed. I have a feeling that you will be a great leader, Naruto, and you may very well lead us to victory, said the woman with a smile on her face. Until the time when you gain the trust and hopes of our entire clan, I will be the leader, but as soon as that time is past, the torch is yours, said Mito confidently. I am confident about being a kunoichi, but I am not fit to be a leader, that much I know about myself. The blonde thought back to the history books he had read that begged to differ. Don't think that about yourself, Mito, said Naruto as he smiled at the young heiress. I will be your soldier for as long as you want me to be, and I will help you bring our clan to greatness, and the world to peace. Mito sighed and nodded before she looked up at Naruto again. You really have a way with words. Naruto chuckled and remained silent as he looked up at the sky. The winds of change is blowing, soon we will bring greatness to the Uzumaki clan, and I will achieve true peace or die trying. The war between the Inuzuka clan and the Shimura clan was well known in the Konoha history archive, but it was known as the War of the Bloody Fangs. The peculiar name came from the ferocity the Inuzuka clan showed, and the bloody violence that was inflicted upon them by their enemies. During the war, an Inuzuka would either be a defeated bloody heap, or primal survivor with the enemy's blood soaking his body. The war had ended after 8 months of battles that resembled hell on earth. It took the deaths of over 1,000 shinobi before a resolution was signed. In the end, the Inuzuka agreed to leave their native nation peacefully and the country would compensate them for their loss over the war. From what Naruto remembered in the history textbook, the money given to the Inuzuka were barely enough to sustain their significantly lowered numbers for a few months, but the feral clan had no choice but to take the money because if the war continued they would be destroyed. Naruto had personally worked or fought with powerful members of both clans back in his own time, so he knew their strengths and weaknesses very well, and he can conclude that the Inuzuka clan was not inferior to the Shimura clan. The main reason the Shimura clan won the war was because they had Sume no Kuni backing them up constantly with financial and physical resources. So we are going to help the Inuzuka clan in this war? Asked a serious Mito as she leaned down closer to the geographic map of Sume no Kuni. Naruto nodded as he mapped out the distances of various points within the country. Yes, they are our ideal first ally, so we have to save them before they sustain too much losses. Mito nodded in acknowledgement, and continued to analyze the landscapes of Sume no Kuni. They've been in the war for about 3 months now, and they seem to be slowly losing ground, said the heiress as she stood back and read out of the file containing intel on the war. The casualties on both sides are rather even, but the Inuzukas just don't have enough resources. The blonde man nodded. Exactly, and that is where we come in, said Naruto with a smile as he turned back to a desk and retrieved a file on the Uzumaki's current supplies. For the last 2 years, we have been producing sustainable farms and started to preserve most of their products for storage. Naruto inputted all the numbers into calculator and smiled when he saw the final number. Based on what we have now, we can sustain a war for a whole year, and with our farms and manufacturers we can refill our stocks in 6 months, which is very good already. Naruto and Mito had been researching and planning through their incoming mission for the last week, and things have been going quite well. Ginryusai had officially tasked Mito with being the commander of the Uzumaki forces, and Naruto as his second in command. Official training routines had been ordered down to all Uzumaki shinobis, giving all of them a month to prepare for the war. The entire clan and all its subdivision were all working in conjunction with each other to prepare in the month mark, and it was going off like clockwork. Naruto had made use of a large office inside the main commander building of the village, and filled it almost to the brim with information of all sorts, from geographic readings to weather patterns in the area. Though the room was quite large, only Naruto and Mito worked inside it. There were other lieutenants in the village, but they were mainly focusing on training the troops and left strategy and logistics to the commander and Naruto. We are going to be moving into the country with about 500 people at first, muttered Mito as she kept punching in numbers into the calculator. Based on the speed we'll be traveling at and the distance between us and Sum no Kuni, it will take us about 5 days to get there. Naruto sighed. That is not fast enough, we should force a faster speed floor. Mito nodded. We can do that, but our troops might use up too much energy before the battle. The blonde man shook his head. We don't have a choice. 5 days to slow traveling with such a last group will just show the Shimura clan that we are coming. We need to force it up to 2 days in order to utilize the element of surprise. 2 days, exclaimed Mito incredulously. Is that even possible? Naruto smirked and nodded. It is, said the man as he looked over at Mito. You are thinking about all of us moving by land, but that is too slow. Naruto led Mito's finger over to a spot of the map. This is the largest river in Sum no Kuni, and the current is going to quite rapid because of the recent rain in the area. Mito smiled and had an enlightened look on her face. You plan to travel by the river? Naruto chuckled and nodded. Yes, I checked that we have several large ships ready to go, and they should run quite well down the wide river, said the lieutenant as he smiled at his leader. This way not only will we make the 2-day mark because of the rapid water, our troops will also have full strength when he go into battle having been rested on the ships. Mito was hyped up and nodded. Okay, so now we can resources and transportation ready, we should decide what to do during the actual battle. The blonde nodded and sat down on his chair. Of course, what do you suggest, Mito? The heiress smiled and cleared her throat. I've been thinking last night. Started Mito a little nervously. Seeing that most people in the Shimura clan are wind users, we can line up our fire users in the front line to lock them in place while our other forces attack at a higher ground. Naruto smiled and nodded, making Mito to let out a breath she didn't know she held. The main battlefield right now is in the middle of a large terrain filled with mainly grass hills, and we can use that to our advantage. Naruto leaned forward to rest his elbows on his knees. You mean we will light the field on fire in order to strengthen our fire users? Mito nodded. Yes, that way they will be able to attack longer without using as much chakra forming their own fire. The blonde smiled kindly and shook his head. Mito, fire user are only effective against wind users when the control where their flames are since they can use their control of the air pressure to deter the original direction of the wind, explained Naruto as he looked directly into Mito's eyes. But when the flames are accessible to everyone, the wind user can use their wind to force the fire back to our direction. The heiress recoiled and nodded sheepishly. Right. Naruto smiled softly and sighed. Don't worry about it too much, Mito, soothed the man as he placed a hand on Mito's shoulder. This is your first large-scale battle. You will become more adept in these situations with experience. Mito nodded and smiled up at her friend. Isn't this your first war too? Have you been fighting like these before? Naruto smirked. I've been in some situations before that is somewhat like a war, but not on a scale this big, said the blonde casually. But I have experience in creating strategies, so you can rest assured that I can do this quite well. The red-haired beauty nodded. I know, she said with a smile. So what do you suggest we do for the initial attack? The lieutenant cleared his throat and looked down at the map. I agree with you that the majority of Shimuras are wind users, and that is their advantage and disadvantage. Started Naruto seriously. Their advantage is that they have far more wind users than we have fire users, and the wind and clear terrain will make us easy to aim for and kill. Mito nodded at her second-in-command's words. And that is not all. Wind jutsus are usually the fastest out of all the elements except for lightning, but it is also easier to control than lightning, so it is easily the best combat element there is. Mito was becoming nervous. That doesn't sound good. Naruto nodded. Normally when other clans are fighting against the Shimura clan, they would have a huge number of people in the front lines to be cannon fodder. All of them would die, but their sacrifice would create an opportunity to strike. Mito looked shocked and quite shook her head. There is no way we will do that, it is just wrong. Naruto smiled. I am very glad you think so too, Mito. Those people are nothing but pathetic, said the man as Mito relaxed, seeing that he was not planning to use a wall of human shields. My plan is much safer and less barbaric. Do you remember my elemental absorption seal? The heiress' eyes widened as a smile emerged on her face. I see what you are planning, exclaimed the girl happily. You are going to use your Miten-like Fuinjutsu to absorb all the wind chakra they send at us. Naruto chuckled. That is the most of it, but because I don't have time to teach many people how to use that sort of Fuinjutsu, I am the only one who can stop the Shimura's attacks, explained the man calmly. But thankfully, I can make a fair amount of clones, and each seal can cover about 10 meters of space, so we should be fine. Mito looked a little concerned. But you are talking about your Kage Bunshin, right? Naruto nodded affirmative. So wouldn't they run out of chakra? The blonde smirked. Normally they would last about 20 minutes if I value quantity over quality, but in this case it is perfect, said Naruto, getting a little excited. These clone will be using the absorption seals, and the chakra they seal with fuel their body because I am also a wind user. Mito gasped at the convenience of the situation. They will be like a self-sufficient engine that will bring our forces to the heart of battle. Mito smiled brightly and sat upright. Good. Now we should be ready to go into battle. Naruto nodded. Yes, there is only so much we can plan and assume in war, so now everything we depend on the actual battle itself, said the man with an optimistic tone. But I have a feeling that the Shimura clan will be running with its tail between its legs. Inuzuka Shinrei was a man of honor and loyalty, and he had the utmost pride of the Inuzuka clan. For 20 years, Shinrei had been the leader of one of the greatest clans in the elemental nations, and he could proudly say that the Inuzuka clan had become greater since his promotion to leader of the clan. Shinrei could look up at the pictures of his forefathers without any shame of regret. As the leader of the clan, Shinrei had no regrets, but as a father of 5, he was worried for his children. Shinrei's 3 boys and 2 girls were his pride and joy, and he wanted nothing but the world for them. Like most others their age, the Inuzuka heirs and heiresses had to train to become ninja at an early age, and they too were forced to fight in the ridiculous war started by a young and naive daimyo. Sume no Kuni had always been the home of the Inuzuka clan, and they worked in harmony with the late daimyo of the nation. Unfortunately, in Sume no Kuni's case, the apple fell far from the tree. The new daimyo was nothing like his father. He was a cruel and naive leader who wanted nothing but his own absolution. The Inuzuka had their own laws and values inside the clan, and when the new daimyo requested that they all abandon their name and join him in the palace as the royal guard, Shinrei refused, and that had triggered the war. The Shimura clan was another clan that was native to Sume no Kuni, and had been rivals of sorts to the Inuzuka. The daimyo had sought the Shimura out to destroy the Inuzuka, and the reward would be the unlimited support by Sume no Kuni as long as he was daimyo. Obviously the Shimura had taken a liking to the new daimyo, and plotted a full-on war with the Inuzuka. Otu-sama, you should not drink anymore, exclaimed a young woman about 20 years of age. She was Inuzuka Kagura, the youngest and a personal favorite of Shinrei. Like all others in the clan, Kagura had twin red fangs tattooed to the sides of her face, and her brown long hair trailed elegantly down her slender back. Shinrei sighed and smiled at his little girl. I'm sorry Kagura-chan, I never wanted this to happen, slurred out the man in a drunk haze. All I wanted to do was to protect the clan's integrity and honor, not bring about its destruction. Kagura had tears welling in her eyes and hugged her father. You did the right thing, Otu-sama. No one in the clan will ever condemn you for this war. Shinrei had to hold back his tears as he stared at the leather wall of his tent he was residing in, right in the middle of the Inuzuka military base. 2 of your brothers are lying severely wounded in the hospital wing, and your remaining brother and sister died. Kagura sobbed into her father's shoulder. They won't die in vain. Shinrei gripped his fists tightly and gritted his teeth. We are not weaker than the Shimura clan, but we are losing this war because of that damn daimyo, cried the man as he slammed his gourd of sake on the table, shattering it to pieces. We can fight for another 6 months at most, If we stall it out any more than that, we will be completely destroyed. Kagura remained silent as she tried to think of a solution to unavail. All we need is some more weapons and food, that way we can attack at full force and wipe the Shimura out at once. Because of the lack of food and resources on the Inuzuka front, only half of the force were being fed. The force had been split into two, and each will fight one after the other daily. The fighting side will get to eat the night before, and so on. Because of this, the strength of the Inuzuka had been significantly weakened, but this was the only way to stretch the war out long enough to hope for an eventual side resolution. Kagura sniffed and wiped her tears. So all we need is the help of another clan. Shinrei sighed and nodded. Yes, but that is unlikely seeing that we are fighting a losing war. The other clans are in enough tension already. If they help us they will put themselves in the spotlight, explained the Inuzuka leader. And that will not be beneficial for them. A large brown canine sat down quietly next to Shinrei as they spoke, and the leader absent-mindedly ran his hand through his Ninken's thick fur. But no matter what, Hiromaru and I will fight to the very end. Kagura let loose her tears and rested herself against her father like she would when she wound when he was a little girl. Why did it have to turn out like this? Please, if there is someone out there, please help us. Hundreds of kilometers away, another father was hugging his daughter one last time before she set out for her own mission. Ginryusai had a serious and professional expression on his face, but those close to him could tell that he was extremely nervous about his daughter going into battle for the first time. For the last week, Ginryusai had made sure that everything was logged and accounted for before Mito left. He couldn't allow anything to go wrong during this war. Not only was it the Uzumaki clan's debut, it was also Mito's official S-rank mission, and he couldn't lose her. You be careful out there, be sure to check everything, never be careless, muttered Genryusai as he held his daughter in his arms. Mito smiled and nodded. I know too, Chan. I promise I will come back safe and sound. Genryusai pulled away from his daughter and nodded at her with a smile. I am proud of you, Mito-chan, said the man as he kissed his daughter's forehead. Mito nodded and headed towards her mother and Asuka. Genryusai, all the while, was focusing his sight on Naruto, who was just standing a few feet away from him. Genryusai wasn't really sure about entrusting so much to the man who had just joined their clan, but something told him that Naruto was a good man and he only wanted to help the clan. Naruto saw that his leader was looking at him, so he started to walk over with a smile. Genryusai-sama. The leader nodded at the man and patted his shoulder. Good luck out there, Naruto-kun, and please, look after Mito-chan for me. The blonde nodded. That is without question, Genryusai-sama. At that moment, Asuka and Ren both came up to Naruto and grabbed onto him. Naruto, cried Asuka loudly, you better protect Mito-chan out there, and bring you home after. Ren nodded rigorously at her words. Naruto looked down at each other them seriously. I promise you both, I will protect Mito with my life. Mito, who was just a fair distance away from the conversation, heard Naruto's words and felt her face heat up a little. Shaking her head of unwanted thoughts, Mito walked up to the ground. It's time to go. Genryusai nodded. Okay. Head out. Mito and Naruto both jumped on top of their respective horses and started their way to the main gate. All the Uzumaki troops were already lined up at the main gate, and they separated into two groups to form a passageway in the middle for the high commands. Each soldier was dressed in full black uniforms that Naruto thought resembled a lot like the Konoha Junin uniform. The Uzumaki symbol was proudly wore on each of them, and some of them had the job of carrying a tall banner with the Uzumaki symbol proudly blazed upon it. Mito rode down the passage with a serious expression on her face, trying her best to suppress the nervousness in her heart. Naruto rode silently behind Mito, his eyes locked onto her back. The man was quite worried for Mito. It was clear that she was an innocent girl and have never seen the horrors of war. One could never describe the cries of anguish, the red rivers, the smell of burnt flesh, and the eyes of each men they slay. Naruto was praying inwardly that Mito would remain the vibrant and happy young woman she was, after the war. Soon Mito and Naruto reached the front of the Uzumaki army, and the former looked back one last time at her friends and family, before she turned away and headed out the village. Are you ready, Naruto? Asked the commander. Yes, said Naruto clearly. We are all ready. The army had to travel on foot for a few hours before they arrive at the origin of the largest river in Sum no Kuni. Naruto had sealed the 5 large ships into 5 scrolls, and they were all ready to use once they arrive at the river. For the past few days Naruto had been mentally and physically preparing himself for once again walking into a war. He had fully measured his chakra capacity and his chakra control, and he knew what he was capable of. Now he will test his powers out on the Shimura clan. Steering his gaze forward, Naruto looked outward onto the horizon as he channeled his chakra to the bottom of his horse's souls. Here we go. Kagura found herself waking up from a night of dreamless sleep, and she momentarily forgot where she was. Looking around her surroundings, she saw that she was once again in her father's commander tent, but he was nowhere in sight. Wiggling around in the chair she was sleeping in, Kager noticed that her father's favorite coat was keeping her warm. She has been thinking with her father inside the tent for the last 2 days, and there was no great breakthrough yet. Otu-sama must have gone somewhere already, thought the young woman as she rubbed her eyes free of any drowsiness. The sound of a small whimper beside Kagura made her look down to her side, and she smiled when she saw her own little Ninken. Hey Shiroi-chan, chirped the Inuzuka heiress with a smile as she scratched her darling dog behind his ear. Shiroi was complete covered with wilt fur and had a pair of bright blue eyes. Kagura had chosen him as her Ninken the moment he was born from her older brother's Ninken, and she had cared for the dog like her own flesh and blood. Kagura sighed as she turned to the side and kissed Shiroi on the top of his head. How are you feeling, Shiroi-chan? The Ninken snuggled against his master's legs and whimpered. Kagura sighed and rubbed her best friend tenderly. I know. I'm scared too, boy. Shiroi leaned up and licked around Kagura's face, making her giggle. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the sound of the battle horn sounded through the whole base, and a sudden fear struck Kagura like a bolt of lightning. Shit! Cursed the girl as she ran out of the tent with her Ninken. By the sound of the horn, everyone in the encampment sprang into action. They were all trying to get to their posts as quickly as possible. Kagura watched as her clansmen all rushed back and forth to grab their weapons and equipment to fend the incoming attack, and at that moment, she knew that many of them would not come back alive. The familiar feeling of utter dread came upon the girl once again, and she forced her legs to move from where she motionlessly stood. Grabbing the nearest spear, Kagura ran along with her clansmen. Where is Otu-sama? Asked Kagura authoritatively to a man at her side. The man looked grim. The commander is already at the battlefront. Kagura felt a bolt of fear jolt down her spine as she sped up as fast as she could to rush to the battlefield. Her father was still wounded from the last battle, and their sudden ambush must be intended to kill him. Kagura cursed the Shimura clan inside her heart as she gripped her spear tightly in her hands. Shiroi was running alongside his master obediently despite his fear. He wanted to fight alongside Kagura no matter what. As Kagura edged up to the battlefield, the sounds of battle already filled her senses like an unwanted disease. From far, she could see a large dust cloud that had taken over the majority of the battlefield, and it housed where the strongest shinobi were fighting. Invisible blades of wind were flying through the battlefield like pestering lethal flies, and bodies were once again dropping one after another. Blood was flowing freely on the ground and slowly painted the grass red. Kagura cursed her own heightened sense of smell as the stench of blood filled her nose. On the other side of the battlefield was Kai Shimura, the eldest son of the Shimura clan leader. Shimura Bakura. Lately, the son of the leader had often taken charge and fought on the battlefield as the leader of the Shimura forces, and he was not far off from his father. Kai was as ruthless and cold-blooded as his father, but he was somewhat justified since they were in war. Sympathy in war was just idiotic. It is the survival of the fittest, and the strongest will win, that is the only rule in war. Kai's personal guards were clashing blades with Shinrei, and the older leader was already breathing heavily. Damn you, Shimura! Muttered Shinrei as he Ninken panted next to him. Kai smirked as he sat calmly on his horse. Come on Shinrei Dono, my father assured me that you would at least be able to offer a decent challenge. Shinrei cried out fiercely and ran forward with his Ninken. Suga Pierce! Cried the man as he jumped and spun his body around with Hiromaru. They crashed into one of Kai's guards and sent him flying into the distance. The vortex of Inuzuka power continued to tear up the battlefield, but it was not enough. The 5 remaining guards of Kai all formed simultaneous hand signs. Futon. K's no Yeba, blades of wind technique. Announced the group of men as blades of razor-sharp wind form around their stretched palms. They all rushed to the leader of the Inuzuka, eager to end the war by killing the old man. Jinju Kanbi Henge. Sotaro, human-beast combination transformation, double-headed wolf. A cloud of smoke concealed Shinrei from view, and when the smoke cleared, a large 2-headed wolf is shown. Its large fangs and dripping jaws threatened to tear all Shimura's to pieces as he jumped into the air. Cho Garoga, Super Fang Wolf Fang. The giant vortex of centrifugal force smashed through 4 of the guards and their blade effortlessly. Kai smirked. You still have 2 left. Shinrei stopped and turned back at Kai. You bastard. The dead faces of his children came back to his eyes as he howled in anger. Die! Cried Shinrei as he charged at Kai at his full speed. Suddenly, 2 shadows emerged, hovering just above the large wolf body of Shinrei, and before he could react, he felt extreme pain pierce his 2 sides. Grunting, Shinrei fell to the ground and reverted back to his original form, Hiromaru lying beside him. The Shimura commander chuckled. Now this is the end. Shinrei felt his strength leaving him as he pushed himself up. There was a deep wound on his right side, and he looked down to see that his Ninken had the same wound on his left. Damn it! Cursed the Inuzuka leader as he glared at Kai with his primal anger. This is not over. I will avenge my son and daughter. This time Kai himself jumped off of his horse and delivered a hard kick, right at Shinrei's face, sending him flailing backwards to the ground. Just like you clan, all bark and no bite. Shinrei spat out some blood from his mouth and stood up once again. I will not die so easily, muttered the man as Hiromaru made his saw to his side. And you will not underestimate the Inuzuka clan. Otou-sama! Cried Kagura as she landed right beside her father with her spear ready. Shinrei actually didn't want his daughter to be here. Kagura-chan, what are you doing here? It was left to Kagura to rule the Inuzuka if Shinrei died, and he was worried that if the both died the clan would be left without a leader. Kagura looked at her father with conviction. I will help you fight this battle. Shiroi was right by his master's side and growled over at Kai. Kai smirked when he laid eyes on Kagura. I got to say Shinrei Dono, this daughter of yours is much more beautiful than your other one, said the young man with a slick tone that made Shinrei and Kagura sick. How about you hand her over to me, so she can live on after your clan is destroyed? Kagura growled in pure hatred and anger. You bastard! Cried the girl as she charged up to Kai with her spear. Kagura! No! Cried the Inuzuka leader as he ran after her. Kai smirked and easily sliced Kagura's spear in 2 and caught her in his arms. You smell good, muttered the man as he sniffed Kagura's neck. Kagura growled and kicked over her shoulder, but Kai caught her leg and held it in place. You are flexible too, that makes it so much more fun. Let go of my daughter! Cried Shinrei as he sent a claw at Kai, forcing him to separate from his daughter. Kai jumped back and laughed out loud for all to hear. You are all so pathetic. It is hard to believe that such weaklings would even need someone of our caliber to battle, sneered the man. I guess your name says it all, you are all nothing but dogs. Kagura and Shinrei were shaking in rage as the battle stormed on around them. You will pay for this. Shinrei sped forward and grabbed the broken spear of his daughters from the ground. Die! Cried the man as he stabbed his hand forward, aiming the spear at Kai's heart. Kai merely caught the spear and sliced it to pieces with his wind. Do you ever have anything else to say? Asked the man rhetorically as he kicked Shinrei back. Otu-sama, cried Kagura as she ran forward to catch her father. Are you alright? Shinrei coughed out some blood as he looked up at his daughter. Run, Kagura-chan. You can't beat this man. Run before he could kill us both. Kai smirked when he heard what Shinrei said. I won't kill your daughter if she shows me a good time. I need a good stress relief. Kagura glared at Kai and stood up fiercely. I will rather die than to have anything to do with a pig like you, muttered the girl as Kai's smile dimmed a little. The Shimura clan will never be as powerful as us, we have our bonds and ties with each other, and you are all just pigs fighting to your last men because of some money. Kai started to glare at Kagura. We will always have our integrity and honor, and you Shimura will forever rot in hell for your evil. Die, you wench, cried Kai as he raised his wind-covered hand. I will kill all of you dogs. Shinrei watched on his horror as the man neared his daughter with his wind blade. Kagura-chan. Kagura's eyes remained focused and fierce. She knew that she may died right here and now, but she would accept it with no fear. Just as Kai was about to slash open Kagura's throat, he suddenly felt a jolting pain on his right leg. Everyone's attention were drawn to the sudden spew of blood from Kai's leg as it was sliced off of his body. Ah! Cried the man in pain as he began to fall. Kagura and Shinrei's eyes widened when a man holding tri-prong kunai suddenly appeared in front of them and slashed away at Kai's leg. The two remaining guards of the young Shimura quickly caught their leader and jumped back. Kai was still screaming with abandon as blood continued to flow freely from his gaping wound. Shinrei looked up at the blonde man. Who are you? The blonde man looked back and smiled kindly at Shinrei. I have come to help. Suddenly, the sounds of many battle horns were blared from behind the main battle. Shinrei, Kagura, and all the others looked back to the edge of the battlefield to see a huge army heading their way. The ground was rumbling from the united footsteps of the hundreds of shinobi charging their way, and from far people would see the banners proudly shown to all. It was a peculiar swirl that everyone present knew, it was the Uzumaki clan. Mito was leading the army on her horse as she sped down the grasslands with her katana drawn. Destroy the Shimura clan, ordered the heiress as the Uzumaki soldiers all cried out for battle. The loud united yell resonated through everyone's ears. Naruto smirked and nodded. You got it, Mito, said the man as he turned back to the shocked Kai and his guards. The blonde man threw his kunai at the Shimura leader, and the moment before the one of the guards blocked it, Naruto caught it in his hands again. His icy blue eyes barred into the soul of the three Shimura men. Die, muttered Naruto as he sliced through the jugulars of the two guards within a split second. Kai fell to the ground and was scrambling in pain. Please. Before he could say any more, Naruto appeared in front of him, sneered at him. Rasengan. A blue orb of spinning chakra grinded into Kai's body and forced him further into the ground. His cries of pain and anguish could not be heard over the earth grinding against Naruto's spinning chakra. The dome of chakra erupted from the ground as the Rasengan tore it apart, and when it died down Kai's body could no longer even be found, it was grinded to pieces. Shinrei was up on his feet as Kagura supported his side. The Uzumaki clan. Naruto ironed his gaze in front of him and stretched out his hand with a thumbs up. Yeah. With the end of the war in Sum no Kuni, came a short while of peace for the Uzumaki clan. The Shimura clan had officially capitulated and had offered the Inuzuka clan a very valuable peace treaty. The treaty specifies that the Shimura clan will not clash with the Inuzuka clan for the next 50 years. Other than that, the Inuzuka will receive a considerable amount of compensation funds from the Shimura and Sum no Kuni, and they will be able to keep their native land inside the nation. Sume no Kuni had also gifted the Inuzuka with 50 acres of land near their original position, and had freed them of any taxes for the next 3 years. Inuzuka Shinrei felt extremely superior when the daimyo himself to offer him the treaty and the ownership papers. The young daimyo had an obvious fake smile on his face, and that only made the deal all the more satisfying. Genryusai had officially met with Shinrei, and the two leaders had signed an official alliance and a defense pact, signifying that they two clans were officially tied with each other and will protect each other no matter what. The Uzumaki's name had once again been spread out throughout the lands as a powerful clan, one that was capable of aiding the Inuzuka and almost completely destroyed the Shimura clan a day after they joined the war. By the end of the Sume no Kuni War, over 500 Inuzuka members had perished, and over 1,200 Shimura soldiers had died. But in the end, only a minimal 50 Uzumaki men had died, so it was safe to say that the war was a tremendous victory for the Uzumaki clan. Not only did they gain the notoriety that they wanted, they also gained a loyal and powerful ally in the Inuzuka clan. "You did a tremendous job, Naruto-kun," said a smiling Genryusai as he looked over the full report of the war that Naruto had just provided him. "With such minimal losses you gained our clan with a new ally. This is much more than what I initially expected." Naruto stood in front of his leader and bowed in return. "You are too kind, Genryusai-sama. I merely completed my mission," replied the man professionally. The Uzumaki leader chuckled and stood up from his desk. "You are too modest, Naruto-kun," said the man as he rounded his desk to place a hand on the young man's shoulders. "I have read all the reports provided to me, and everyone, including Mito-chan, said that you were the one that was responsible for the strategies of the battle." Genryusai smiled and nodded approvingly. "I must say that you are quite talented as a leader." The blonde Uzumaki smiled. "Thank you, Genryusai-sama." Genryusai nodded back and walked over to his large window and peered down at his village. "I can feel the winds of change blowing, and soon we Uzumakis will be back on the pinnacle of the elemental nations." The leader turned back to the most power ninja in his village. "You are a blessing, Naruto-kun, a wayward son of our clan that has come back to provide us with power, and with you here, I am certain that we will continue to win one battle after another." Naruto nodded in all seriousness. "I would like nothing more than to bring our clan into greatness, but I am not proud of this violence. I will only rejoice in the fact that one day, there will be no more war because of all the effort we put forth today." Genryusai looked amused as he looked back at Naruto. "You are quite morbid for a young man, but you are right, one day war will no longer be needed." Naruto was not sure if he and his leader were thinking about the same ending, but decided to drop the subject for the moment. "If I may ask, Genryusai-sama, how is Mito-sama doing after the war?" asked the young man with true worry. Naruto hadn't seen Mito ever since they came back to Uzushiogakure. She had locked herself in her room for the first few days and only walked around her family compound occasionally afterwards. Naruto had thought about visiting Mito, but he decided to let her have her space for the time being. The Uzumaki leader sighed. "I think she is fine now. Time is the best medicine for war." Naruto bit his lips for a second before he looked back up at his leader. "Is it okay if I pay Mito-sama a visit later today?" asked the man with a hesitant undertone. Genryusai suppressed the urge to smirk and nodded. "Of course it is okay. I'm sure Mito-chan will enjoy your company." Naruto smiled and bowed. "Thank you, Genryusai-sama, I will be sure to visit today." The main Uzumaki compound was a few miles away from Naruto's small home and it took him a few minutes to travel there through the busy streets. Naruto had been worried about Mito for the past few days and really wanted to see if she needed his help. The girl was obviously not ready for the horrendous scenes she witnessed during the war. At the end, Mito herself had killed over 200 men in her frenzy, which was very impressive if Naruto had anything to say about it. It was obvious to Naruto that Mito had great skills as a kunoichi and a lot of potential. The girl was already at Junin level, and was one of the elites of the Uzumaki clan, but with more growth, she would turn into the legend Naruto knew she would become. Based on the history books back in Konoha, Mito was able to completely seal the Kyuubi into herself without any help, and that alone suggested a significant superiority in Fuinjutsu compared to all others. Naruto sighed as he approached the large gates of the Uzumaki compound and walked up to the guards. "Excuse me, I am Uzumaki Naruto and I am here to visit Mito-sama." The guard's eyes seemed to widen at Naruto's name and quickly nodded. "Of course, Naruto-sama, please come inside." The blonde Uzumaki walked through the opened gates graciously with a confident stride and a bland stare in his eyes. The innards of the large clan home were quite impressive, just the garden was a large piece of lands with very beautiful landscapes of nature. The pink petals of sakura trees decorated and danced around the area as the wind blew through them and carried them in the wind. A small river ran through the garden with grace as many koi fish swam around in the water in luxury. There was a main path that led to the lobby of the compound, but Naruto sensed that Mito was actually much closer to him than what he expected. Looking over to the left, over the tall rocks decorating the sides of the river, Naruto saw Mito sitting peacefully inside an elegant gazebo. She was back in her usual white kimono, and her beautiful red hair was once again flowing gently down her back as several strands were carried up by the soft wind. Naruto felt a smile seep onto his face as he looked over at the beautiful girl. He rejoiced in the fact that Mito looked back to normal, though he could only hope that everything was actually alright. The young man made his way across the river and toward the beautifully crafted gazebo. The soft wind and warm sunlight soothed Naruto of his nervousness, and he smiled when the sweet smell of roses reached his nose as he walked into the girl's vicinity. "Mito-chan," muttered Naruto softly as he smiled at his friend. Mito abruptly looked over and her eyes immediately connected with Naruto's own. An involuntary surge of happiness emerged from Mito's deep thoughts at the sight of Naruto. For the last week Mito had locked herself inside her home to recuperate from her devastating experience in Sum no Kuni, and she had always hoped that Naruto would come visit her. Mito was disappointed that it took Naruto a whole week before he finally came to see her, but she was glad that he did worry about her. "Naruto-kun," greeted Mito softly as a smile graced her delicate features. Naruto sat down next to Mito and smiled kindly at her. "I'm sorry it took me so long to visit, but how are you feeling?" Mito was still constantly reminded of all the blood and dead bodies she witnessed back in the war, but at the same time, seeing Naruto's blonde hair and taking in his vanilla scent made her feel safe once again. "I'm feeling much better, thank you, Naruto-kun." The blonde sighed lightly with his smile still on his face. "Shinrei-sama had officially signed an alliance with Genryusai-sama. Our mission was a remarkable success." Mito smiled, but looked visibly tired. "That's good." Naruto sensed the guilt and fear in Mito's heart, and gently placed a hand on her shoulder for comfort. "I know how you feel, Mito-chan, I felt the same way, but we have to look past this and let time drain out the pain," whispered the man gently as he sat closer to Mito. "We live in a world of warfare, and this is what real shinobi life is about. As much as I hate to admit it, the war we just experienced is not a rare occurrence." The Uzumaki heiress smiled a little before she looked into Naruto's eyes. "I remember you promising me that I will not have to go through that again. When will that happen?" asked the girl with a grin. Naruto nodded and patted Mito on the head. "As soon as possible. I want to end the era where war is necessary," said the man rather seriously before a grin appeared on his face. "But of course, I have to keep my promise to the all-powerful Mito Heim." Mito giggled as she looked up at Naruto. "You bet." The blonde Uzumaki smiled at the bright look on Mito's face. "Come with me, Mito-chan, I want to show you something," said the man as he took hold of Mito's hand. "I'm sure you will love it." Mito blushed a little at the intimate touch and stood up. "Where are we going?" Naruto smirked and began to lead Mito out of the Uzumaki compound. "It's a surprise I have for you," said the man with a grin as he and Mito walked through the main gate while ignoring the surprised look on the guards' faces after seeing Naruto being so close to their heiress. The two powerful members of the Uzumaki clan made their way through the sunny streets of the village in a rather brisk pace, and people were all looking over to see the most powerful man in the village holding the heiress' hand. It did not help when people saw the obvious flustered and happy look on Mito's face as she followed Naruto's lead onto something that looked oddly like a date. Many people were smiling at the happy couple seeing how good they looked together. It was refreshing to see an Uzumaki without the usual red hair, and the handsome blonde man looked very nice holding onto Mito's hand. Mito honestly thought that Naruto would let go of her hand once they were on the road, but she was really happy that he didn't. Naruto's hand was warm and it made her feel safe and secure. Mito tightened her own grip around Naruto's hand as she walked up right beside him with a smile on her face. "So are you going to tell me where we are going?" asked the girl looking up at the man. Naruto smiled and winked at Mito. "I said it was a surprise, no telling." Mito only giggled at his giddy tone. It was nice to see the normally serious Naruto to be so laid back and relaxed. The blonde Uzumaki continued his way with his friend all the way toward the outskirts of the village. They passed the flimsy pseudo border that was on the edge of a large forest that filled the backside of the island. It was late summer and the trees were looking very healthy and green, adding to the special moment between Naruto and Mito. The forest was considered an uncharted area for most of the people in the village, so there was no road or developed area in it, so the two Uzumakis would have to trek through it. Mito gladly followed Naruto toward his surprise, but her kimono was getting in the way when she would jump from tree to tree. Naruto saw Mito's condition and quickly caught her on his back as she jumped. "Sorry Mito-chan, I guess I should have asked you to change into more suitable clothes, but I'll get us there soon," said the man casually as he sped up with Mito on his back. Mito blushed heavily as she placed her hands on Naruto's shoulders. "Oh okay. Thank you, Naruto-kun." As the heiress was enjoying a surprisingly steady ride on Naruto's back, she couldn't help but notice how warm she felt pressing against her friend's back. Although Mito hadn't known Naruto for long, but he had become her pillar of strength at times, and she felt safe and at peace on his back. Naruto was still a major mystery to Mito. She didn't know where he grew up, who taught him to be a ninja, or why he was so passionate about the Uzumaki clan, but solving the intricate puzzle of Uzumaki Naruto was on Mito's top priority list. Mito was broken out of her thoughts when she noticed that they have pretty much reached the end of the forest and she could already see the bright sunlight ahead of them. The collected shades created by the thick crowd of canopies started to thin out as they approached the clearing, and Mito began to feel the warmth of the sunlight on her back. "Here we are, Mito-chan," muttered Naruto softly as he made one final step out into the clearing. Mito's eyes were wide as she took in the gorgeous sight in front of her. They reached the very edge of the island, and they were standing on a large grassy field located on the top of a cliff that was the end of the island. The cloudless blue sky was laid out in a panoramic portrait ahead of them, and the brilliant sun shone majestically on all of existence. The crashing waves graced the moment with epic sounds of nature, and its water sprinkled multiple rainbows as it cascaded back down into the ocean. Naruto saw the amazed look on Mito's face from the corner of his eyes and smiled. "I found this spot a few days ago when I was exploring the island," softly spoke the man as he turned his gaze ahead of him, "and I knew that I had to bring you here to see it." The Uzumaki heiress still had a smile on her face as she descended from Naruto's back and stood beside him. "It's beautiful," whispered the young woman gently. "I've been living on his island for a long time, and I have never even heard of something like this on the island." Naruto smiled and sighed in relaxation. "Well, I'm very glad I found something like this at home," said the blonde with a chuckle as he looked down at his beautiful friend. "Shinobis are often stressed out for many reasons, and watching the day pass by here will soothe our souls." Mito smiled at Naruto and nodded. Yeah. The young man placed a hand on Mito's back as he gestured to a large rock in the middle of the grass field. Let's go sit over there. The Uzumaki heiress smiled as she hugged her knees to her chest. The sun was high up in the blue sky, and its light warmed Mito's body from the chilling autumn wind. The sound of crashing waves and wind blowing against the trees made the mood of the place very serene and relaxing. Mito felt a lot better than before already, partly because of the scenery, and mainly because of Naruto. In her week of seclusion, Mito had constantly tried to make best of her experience, and hearing Naruto's words made Mito confirm her thoughts. Naruto sat down next to the girl with a smile. So what are you think about? Mito smiled with her eyes glued onto the scenery in front of her. I'm thinking that our efforts to fight war with war will protect beautiful things like this place from destruction, whispered the girl softly. Our presence in Sum no Kuni stopped the war in a few days, and saved thousands of civilians from another few months of war. Mito looked over to Naruto and stared into his blue eyes. We may have killed many people to do so, but we saved more as a result. Naruto nodded. That is a good way of thinking about it. All our efforts are for the greater good, said the blonde man seriously. The world is not perfect and peace comes with a price. Things might be very messy right now, but there will be a day when we will reach stability. The Uzumaki heiress smiled and leaned closer to Naruto. And what will stability look like? Naruto grinned and looked forward toward the ocean. It will be beautiful, started the man gladly. The trees will be greener, the sky will be brighter, and smiles will be abundant in our village. Mito smiled at Naruto's enthusiasm. Children will get to go to school and learn before they become ninja. They will be able to taste sake and have children before they die, and parents will always be able to take care of their children. Naruto smiled at Mito. We will build a village where peace is the norm, and one by one, the others will follow our example. Then finally one day, the world will be able to progress and prosper as one united people. Mito smiled at the twinkle in Naruto's eyes and nodded. I look forward to seeing it, whispered the girl as she rested her head on Naruto's shoulder. The blonde looked down at the beautiful face of Mito with a smile. I promise that you will see it. Naruto was once again in the office of his leader along with Mito, and they were discussing the next steps of their return to glory. It seemed that the Uzumaki's efforts in Sum no Kuni had caught the attention of many other clans throughout the elemental nations, and they have received many requests for help. It was a great time for war and many people needed help, which was great for the Uzumaki clan. It was clear that the Uzumakis wanted more allies on their side, and weakened clans were ideal for them at the moment. So what do you think, Naruto-kun? Asked the leader of the Uzumakis. Who should be our next target? Naruto and Mito were sitting across from Genryusai in a large table filled with documents of various nations and their situations. The pile had grown constantly in the last few days and Naruto had spent many hours browsing through it. Mito had joined him in the cause, and together, they created a list of potential clans that they will help. Geographically closer clans would be more ideal, since it would mean easier transportation, but it still depended on the benefits. I think we should go with this one, said Naruto holding up a file. The Yuki clan is under attack by the Kagaya clan. Mito leaned back on her seat in thought. I've read that one. The daimyo of Mizu no Kuni wants to take control of the Yuki clan by killing off its leaders, stated the heiress as she recalled her reading from a few days ago. The daimyo took advantage of the violent nature of the Kagaya clan and tasked them to eliminate most of the older generation of the Yuki clan. Naruto nodded. Yes, and this has been going on for about 2 months now. Genryusai nodded as his subordinates continued. The Yuki clan is quite formidable on its own, but they are losing because of their geographical weakness. Naruto pointed down at the map he placed on the table. The Yuki clan is based on the northern edges of Mizu no Kuni, which initially was ideal for their clan, explained the blonde. Their back and sides are protected by a series of tall snowy mountains, and their front is blocked by a large river that separated them from the rest of Mizu no Kuni. Ginryusai leaned in closer at the map. That should offer the Yuki clan plenty of protection already. How are they losing to the Kagaya clan? The blonde sighed. While the natural protection can help the Yuki clan, it is also a liability because they can only keep so much resource in their isolated land. Said Naruto as the others nodded in understanding. The Yuki clan is clearly not supplied enough for a long conflict, and the Kagaya clan had blocked off their only route of trade, the south of the river. The blonde circled the large river on the map that blocked the Yuki clan from civilization. The Kagaya forces have formed a line here, so it is impossible for the Yuki's regular trade routes to maintain flow. Mito frowned. The Kagaya clan is trying to isolate the Yuki within their own home, and let them slowly starve to death. Naruto nodded. Yes, reports mentioned that the Kagaya are mainly attacking with members running across the river to engage the Yuki in close-range battles, which the Yuki are not particularly good at. Said the blonde. The Kagaya are viciously powerful close-range fighters, and their ruthless battle tactics far outmatch the Yuki clan members. Naruto sat back down and looked at his leader. The Yuki clan possesses their own Kekkei Genkei, Hyoten, which is powerful against many different kinds of enemies, but the Kagaya also have their own unique power. Mito grimaced. Shikatsumyaku, dead bone pulse. Ginryusai nodded. Yes, I have fought against some of them before, and they are some of the most powerful people I have ever met. Naruto nodded. Yes, Kagaya members with Shikatsumyaku are very hard to kill, as their skeletal structure is very strong and durable, and normal attack with never break their bones, explained the blonde. The Yuki clan relies mostly on ranged attacks, which are usually weaker than close contact attacks, so they are quickly losing numbers to the Kagaya clan. Ginryusai agreed and crossed his arms together. But I know that not a lot of Kagaya members will have the Shikatsumyaku. It is not a common Kekkei Genkei even within the clan. Mito nodded. That is true, but even so we don't know how many of the Kagaya can use their Kekkei Genkei. No, but we can assume that they will be the Kagaya's most powerful members. Said Naruto with a smirk. And we Uzumakis are quite powerful when put up against people like them. Ginryusai smirked when he understood what Naruto was saying. The Kagaya members with the Shikatsumyaku will most likely be close-range fighters, which many Uzumakis can just seal into confinement. Mito looked a little dubious but Naruto maintained his smile. A group of Uzumakis against one Kagaya with Shikatsumyaku is good odds, and our troops will be able to seal everything that the Kagaya can throw at us. Mito sighed. I guess our sealing teams will be able to handle the Shikatsumyaku members. Naruto nodded. Yes, then our combat forces along with the Yuki forces should be able to force a way through the river and push the Kagaya back. Ginryusai gave Naruto a look. Are you sure about that? The blonde smirked and nodded. Yes, fighting mass amounts of people with close-range attacks are my specialty. Ginryusai sighed with a chuckle. Okay then, I will give you 3 days to come up with an official plan of action, and if it is sound then I see no reason to not do this.